Welcome to the Author's Porch, where every good conversation happens. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride from author to author. We want to give you an experience where you learn and enjoy the conversation. Authors tell you about their journey, you learn about new books, and at the end of the day, you go home with a smile on your face because the Author's Porch is a beacon of light, bringing you home to the family you never knew you had. We hope that you enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Author's Porch, where you know what, I just had did that ever happen to you? And then it happened when I was live, where every great conversation happens. Like my mind went blank, awkward. Anyway, it's probably because I slept in a RV camper last night. That's probably why. Anyways, so where every great conversation happens, and it happens because we trusted Brendan and Bomsey at Master Talk to show us the power of effective communication. We also make sure that we always have a great cup of coffee from Third Day Coffee Seguin, because they have the best coffee in the world. They truly do. Today, we're talking to John Stamp. How are you doing, John?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And thanks for sticking through my crazy brain this morning that is trying to go back to the Arroyo, Colorado. That is the river that we are camping out on. and my scatterbrain, obviously, because I'm having these moments. But I want to jump right into talking here, but before I do, I want to give you guys a little bit of background on John, because when I was reading your bio, I was like, I don't know if I want to have this conversation. I'm a little scared. And the reason is, guys, okay, so I was reading your bio and I was like, NCIS, right?
Yes.
FBI. I was like, all this secret squirrel stuff. And then you wrote a book about it. And then we started talking, and you were talking before the show, because I always talk, before the show to all of the guests. And we were talking about how you wanted to do a podcast possibly about crime from a law enforcement standpoint. And I'm like, I've never committed a crime. That's not why I'm scared. But, you get nervous. Like when I was in the military and the first sergeant would be like, hey, can you come to my office? I'd be like, what's going on? What's happening? Or when you get pulled over and you get nervous. So I'm excited to talk to you because I want to hear about your book, but I'm also like, oh my goodness, are you going to tell me something about my past that I don't know? No, I'm just joking. You're like, come on, lady, get it together.
It is funny you mentioned that though, because my first week with NCIS, you pick up cases and you got to go interview people and find your subjects. So I got to go talk to this guy as a subject in one of my cases. So I'm grabbing my stuff, getting my notebooks and all this stuff together to go find this guy and talk to him. I got to go track this guy down. And the agent sitting next to me is like, what are you doing? I go, oh, I got to go find this guy. I got to talk to him. He's a subject of my case. He's like, yeah, no. I'm like, what do you mean? No, I got to go find the guy. He's not just going to come to me. He's like, yeah, he will. I'm like, what? He goes, where's he work? I told him his unit, and he picks up the phone. He's like, hey, I need this guy at the office in 15 minutes. And I was like, that's never going to work. That's not how law enforcement works, man. And he's like, oh no, he'll be here. He called his chief and was like, deliver this guy. We got to talk to him.
Oh,
and
wow.
In all of my life, as a street cop, as an FBI agent, I've never had somebody deliver my guy to me. So it's funny you mentioned that, your first sergeant calling you in, and it's like, well, I guess that's how it works.
That's the military, huh?
Yeah, it was a whole different ball game. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't tend to run very often. I mean, there are some that will run, but the majority of us just do what we're told. Like we walk in to put ourselves in handcuffs, right? It's very awkward. Awkward we are.
I was always proud of the fact that I had a pretty good relationship with the guys, the known guys, out in when I worked in Charleston. I could call them by name and be like, hey buddy, we got a warrant for you today. And more often than not, they'd be like, yeah, okay. You treat people good, and you get to know people over time. And they got their job, I got my job, and I'll be like, hey bud, you got to go to jail today. And they'd be like, all right, Stamp, as long as you treat them right, everybody's,
Yeah.
That doesn't work out all the time, but it is you're kind of proud when you have that kind of relationship with people and they trust you, you know.
That is true. And sometimes it is just about that respect between two individuals. You did something wrong. You got to pay the piper, and that the other individual's just doing a job, just doing what needs to be done, and then you can both go home healthy and safe at the end of the day, for lack of better words.
Well, in that example, he's got to go to jail. I'm going to go home.
That is his temporary home.
Yeah, you're going to county.
Which is your temporary home for the moment until you do your time, right? Do the crime, do the time.
Yep.
It's funny because growing up, I wanted to be a police officer. I even did a ride along with a police officer, and I got the adrenaline and everything when we did a traffic stop. I was like, it's the coolest thing ever, all this other stuff. And when I would join the Air Force, I wanted to come in security forces, but I couldn't lift enough weight. I was 128 pounds, not now, I was then 128 pounds, couldn't lift the 75 pounds that I needed. I was so devastated, but they said, wait 6 more months, come back, try it. I says, I'll be dead in 6 months. You got to take me now. I got to get out of here. They said, okay, you can cross it a couple years, all that other stuff. And then when I found out what security forces did, I said, no way, Jose, I don't want to do what they do. Cause I didn't, at the time I was like, I'm not going to stand at the gate. I'm not going to do all that crazy stuff. So I went and I talked to Office of Special Investigations, because that's what the Air Force had. And I was all ready for it. I was pregnant with my son. They were going to accept me, but at the time I was married. So fast forward, I had my kids, and I realized that God intervened in my life because I was not equipped, nor could I have ever handled being a police officer. I would never have been able to make it in the law enforcement field. And I think God intervened in exactly the way that he knew that he had to. And I'm extremely thankful, because I was not, and would never have been equipped to do what law enforcement, any level, from the street cop all the way up to CIA type stuff or whatever. I just would not. So thank you for what you've done. I just want to say that, because I thought I was Billy Badass. I could not then, and still cannot, beat my way out of a wet paper bag. So I commend you for what you do. But I also want to know about your book, because I could go in and talk about, your career, the whole entire interview, obviously, because it's phenomenally interesting. As well as, I just love, hearing all kinds of stories. Obviously, everybody does. But you wrote a fantastic book. But it also goes, how do you go from this to writing a book? Where do you get that line, right?
Yeah. I luckily, I was able to do grad school and get that done before the kids started coming. And I worked into a system. I was going to University of Florida, get my master's degree in forensics. And so I'd come into work every day about 2 hours early to get my research done, get my papers done, and move on to my work day. And I was traveling a lot during that time. So that system really worked for me. And I got done with grad school, and suddenly, I've got my degree sitting in a cardboard roller, and I've got it. It's sitting in the closet someplace, but I'm still waking up with the mindset of it's time to go to work, 2 hours before it's actually time to go to work now, because I got nothing else to do. So I had always been wanting to be a writer, and I'd always had little outlines and little ideas. So I just dusted one off and checked the outline out, made sure I got a beginning and an end. And I just applied those 2 hours every day to getting writing done, with a goal of like 500 words a day. And after like 6 or 8 months, I looked at my computer. I was like, wow, I just wrote a book, Wow. I was like, that's pretty fun. I'm going to do it again. So now my 7th, Blood Red Ivory.
That's your 7th book.
Yes. Blood Red Ivory is my 7th, through Wild Blue Press. A really good, they got some fantastic content. But I kind of wanted to look at what I could do with a series, because for the first 6, I'm just like, whatever pops in my head. If I got a good idea and an ending, I'm like,
Yeah.
let's roll. Let's see how these characters work out. For this one, I've always had the idea of a character in my head, and Tybinhoff, I didn't want to call him like, Slate Charger or, Hero McGee or something like that. Like a lot of series,
Yeah.
you look at the name and you're like, oh, this guy's going to be insufferable,
Mhm.
So I gave him a good standard common name that it could be anybody, and
Yeah.
just kind of threw him into the wild. I worked in Africa for a while, and
wow.
worked in different parts of the world. We'd go off, and I'd often work in the same office as OSI, your Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and Navy. We'd all be there together with Army and work cases in different places. So, and I always liked, at least at NCIS, they put a couple agents, throw them out in the field, and they trust that these guys are going to work it out. What you might not have all the resources, you might not have a whole lot of infrastructure to work with, but they send people to the wherever the issue is, and they trust that those agents are going to make it happen. So I just did the same thing to Tybinhoff. I threw him into the middle of Zimbabwe, 5 or 6 hours away from anybody coming to help him, and I tossed him into the middle of an ivory trade war, because I had read.
That's cool.
It was just fun, and I'd read an article, and there's a couple documentaries about these people, but there's a female unit of anti-poaching rangers that was stood up by a former, I think he was an Australian SAS guy, but he built this unit of people who protect elephants and fight the ivory trade in Zimbabwe, and they're all female. They all come from a violent background. They've all been abused in some way, and he recruited these women, trained them up, and they've been incredibly effective in protecting wildlife in this given area. And once I read that article, I was like, I got to do something with these characters. There's just so, not only just to give them a little fist bump, but just having that backstory alone, I got to work with these people,
Yeah.
So I fictionalized the unit, and had, so I got Ty working a homicide of a sailor in their preserve. He has no idea of the ivory trade issue going on, so he's just working his crime right through the middle, because of course nobody's going to talk to the American policeman out in the middle of Zimbabwe. So he just kind of winds his way into being right smack in the middle of these two groups that are just going at each other, and he's kind of got to figure it out, solve the case, and survive to write about it.
Wow.
But it's just I chose him, made him an NCIS agent, because much the same way we have with OSI and CID, they've got a global presence. Their spectrum. I always tell everybody that when I went to NCIS, it was the closest I could find to being a city detective. Because whatever the crime is, as long as it's got a nexus to the Navy, it's mine. I can work it. So it always just had an advantage there. So I could put my characters any place in the world with any given crime, so it's just, there's a lot of fodder. So
that sounds like a movie. What you're like, I'm picturing it. I'm picturing this. I'm picturing, was it Ty? I remember the last name, Binhoff.
Yeah.
Is it Tybinhoff?
Tybinhoff. Yep.
Okay. I was like, I couldn't remember the first name, but the last name just sticks, right? Sticks in your mind. I'm imagining Tybinhoff in Africa working this murder. I can even see him bending down to check something out. Like, it's such a visual representation. Your story is so, you can just see the story when you're talking about it.
I appreciate that. That's I don't know if you're ever a big fan of Michael Crichton, but he always wrote, and when you're reading his work, it's written like a movie, like you can see it. Okay. And I've always kind of, between him, Elmore Leonard, Joseph Wamba, have, I just always I can visualize everything he wrote, so I'm kind of tried to stick that way. But that's a fantastic, thank you very much. I was actually, before we started, I was reading the so-called the PseudoMorgue Scene, because I've got him out in the middle of Zimbabwe, and it's a crime. So, theoretically we should be doing an autopsy. We should be processing the body. We should be doing all this. And he's doing it with nothing, with, no help whatsoever. The facilities aren't even there. There's not even a mortician, so he's just figuring it out. And every place he goes, every place he goes and everybody he talks to is like, you're gonna get eaten. You know, you're working a crime scene in the middle of the bush. Something's gonna eat you. You know,
Right? You would think, yeah,
yeah,
it's like you're about, there's a lion right there. You
yeah,
may not want to open up the body. That's fresh meat for the lion.
yeah. And I just enjoyed at one point he's just in a standoff with a giant bull elephant, and you know, he's okay. Well, bull elephant's walking through my crime scene. How do I approach this?
Right, yeah. Oh
and
my
it
goodness.
and
Yeah.
it's reflective of when I was working in Djibouti, Africa, and I was training their gendarme, and we had to stop our training one day because a herd of camels walked through our crime scene that we were working. So we're all working out together, you know, we're doing a hostage negotiation training, and just I'd see a camel just start walking my way. So I was like, okay guys, we got to time out for a minute, and 10 camels just walked through our
Make a hole for the camels.
Yep.
I can only imagine. That's
Oh,
hilarious.
it was great. It's one of those I was having a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they're, you know, they talk about cases and they talk about this and that, and I always focus on those really interesting moments that you're not going to have anyplace else than in a law enforcement scenario. You're not going to pause a pseudo hostage negotiation to let a bunch of camels come walking through your scene. You know?
That's so true. I mean, a lot of people, all they ever think about is in an urban environment, right? An environment where people own the land.
Yeah.
They don't, you know, you don't think about those remote environments where animals or, you know, something else owns the land. So it's fascinating because you don't think about it. Like, I wouldn't know camels could just walk through the crime scene. I wouldn't think about that.
Me neither until it happened.
Yeah, right. You're like, gotta be there. But I mean, to be able to read about that, you'd be like, no freaking way. Like, if I read that in the book, I'd be like, for real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that would make it that much more interesting to read. That's really cool. And is this book, you said this is book number 7. Is it in a series or just a standalone?
This is the first one for Tybinhoff I did.
Okay.
I'm already working on the second one. I just like that character. He's sarcastic. If anybody anybody in management would immediately try to have him transferred. He's just a pain. He just does not take much serious. Just gets the job done, and he really doesn't care what he has to do to get it done. And it's just I like that guy who's kind of a pain for the administration, but also very effective. So
I have to ask though, is Tybinhoff kind of like your alter ego?
No, I was never that much of a troublemaker. I don't think I was. At least
Sometimes we make characters after ourselves. I've done it.
He's kind of an amalgam of like every really entertaining agent and cop I've ever worked with. You know, just the you get the little pieces of people that's just the one-liners that one of my corporals would have walking up to the window in a traffic stop, or just that dry wit that somebody would have in the interrogation room, and and you catch it, but nobody else in the room catches it, and you're just like, that was a good one. And it's just, you just slipped a zinger in there, bud, and there's only 2 of us that figured it out. You know?
He's the best of everybody, huh?
Yeah, he's just
man.
he's just the best, maybe not always the best politically correct behaviors of everybody I've ever worked with, but
yeah,
you know, everybody in law enforcement's got a little bit of a dark side. So I want to make sure that comes out.
You have to, with that type of job, if you can't find the humor and just something to decompress from all of the seriousness, because I mean, it gets real deep, right? I mean, I wasn't in law enforcement. I was just in the military, and just the things that you have to have conversations about, the serious stuff. If you can't find the humor and the decompression in all of that, it'll eat you alive. I know that. So, the jokes, it's funny because when my son and my daughter went off to college and they would joke about something, the other kids would look at them like, and they were like, oh, and they would call home and they'd be like, Mom, like, we don't fit in. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I didn't warn you about the real world. Because around our dinner table, we would talk about, funeral arrangements and things like that, and joke about, you're not keeping my ashes. Just throw me out. Just throw me out in the wind. And then when you feel the wind in your face, just keep your mouth closed so I don't come back at you. I mean, we would joke about those type of things. And when they would say something like that around other people, they were like, not okay.
Yeah, and I think everybody in that life, you end up at a dinner party at least one point where you're just talking about the funniest thing that happened to you that week. And my wife's a nurse, so she gets it. She's just as bent as I am. But
yeah.
You're there with people that don't deal with that sort of stuff, and you just tell them the funniest thing that me and my wife were talking about just a couple hours ago, and no one laughing, and just like, well, we're never being invited back here again.
Yeah, you won't go to that dinner party ever again. Yeah, my husband's Army, I'm Air Force, so we totally get it.
Yep. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So Tybinhoff, that's the first book. And the name of that book again is?
Blood Red Ivory.
Blood Red Ivory. So he's the first book with Tybinhoff is Blood Red Ivory. Mm-hmm. And that's the 7th of your books. Number 7 of all of your books. Are all of your books where the main character is law enforcement?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I lost my mind at one point and decided I had to do a fantasy. I had to do a high fantasy novel. I enjoy reading high fantasy.
Yeah.
So I wrote Die Hard in a Castle. I had the idea for a long time that, Die Hard's great, but what would happen if it's in medieval Europe? So I took like the most annoying, privileged royal you could ever think of, like the guy whose dad spent his life trying to build everything that they have, and he's an artist, and he's denied his official duties to be part of the militia. He's an artiste, and so I got this guy, built him up so everybody kind of wants to punch him. And then I take out his entire guard force and I fill his castle up with mercenaries that are trying to kill him. And to have at it, buddy. Good luck. And that was a lot of fun to write. But the pure amount of research that had to go into that, I'd spend a day learning horse terminology to write a 3-page sequence from one castle to another, clothing, weapons. I'm like, wow, it's just a lot of research for that one. So I maybe I'll go back to fantasy at some point, but I like writing in the current world, So but other than that, everything, even my horror books start with a detective,
So I've read sci-fi and fantasy my entire life. It's my favorite genre to read, my very favorite genre, but it's the one that I cannot write. It's the only genre that I can't even get an idea to stick in my head for. I am totally lost. I try, and it's like, puh.
Yeah.
It's my favorite to read, but I cannot get a storyline going.
I'm much the same way. I really want to do a space opera at some point. But everyone you read outside of Star Wars just isn't as good. And I'm not trying to insult anybody. I think the infrastructure and the architecture of the universe is such that, Star Trek also, but it's as such that anybody who tries anything else doesn't measure up. And there's a lot of really good sci-fi series out there, but for me personally, I really want to do it, but I gotta, the only way I can do it is if I think that it would be on par with Star Wars or Star Trek. And
it's very hard.
I write notes and I'm like, no, it's just not there.
Yeah. They really set a bar. And when you set a bar that freaking high, it is really, really hard to match up. I agree with you 100%.
Yep.
Now, let me ask you this. So this is something that I'm working on currently, and I'm digging in deep, and there's 2 serial killer stories that I'm currently working on under a whole different pen name. And I really, really want these ones to come to fruition because I love the storyline itself. Obviously, they're fictional. I'm totally, you know, like I told you, I couldn't whip my way out of what paper bag. I would be like, try to cut someone, like, oh, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? But they're two storylines. Now, could you ever see yourself writing that type of story?
From the bad guys' perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you know, I always come up with the good guys, but you know, you got an idea. Oh, here's my guy. I'm gonna, you know, he does this and he's like this, and you're like, well, great. Who's he going against? You know, so you gotta have a bad guy. You know, and I would love to write from the bad guy's perspective. And I do that in the books, but carrying an entire novel from being the hunter, like an American Psycho type thing.
Yeah.
I would love to try it. I don't know if I could pull it off.
Yeah, because I got I was in a writing group and I got a writing prompt, and I didn't even know I had it in me, but the prompt led to this persona coming out of the serial killer. The serial killer persona just came out, and I was like, wow. And then it just started going, and I was like, oh yes, this is something. The story unfolded in front of me as I wrote it, and for the rest of the night I just continued on, and I already have the whole entire outline. I was like, this has to happen because I love it.
That's when you know you're in the zone. You
know,
yeah.
So I always wondered if somebody could, you know, from one that is so on one side of the track could write from the other side of the track.
I would love to try it. I honestly don't know. I would love to, because I kind of got a loose idea of throwing Ty up against a serial killer at some point.
Okay.
Probably book 4 or 5, but as far as doing it from the perspective of the bad guy all the way through the book, and kind of making Ty or the protagonist, the just ancillary characters that just get in his way, I think that'd be fun. I can't wait to see what you come up with. You know?
Yeah, me too. I'm hoping that I can, because I was thinking, well, how do I? Because I don't know anything about, you know, serial killers other than what I watch on TV, or law enforcement other than what I watch on TV. So there is a whole hell of a lot of research that I'm going to have to do, you know. So I'm like, oh man, I got to research. So maybe that's
you can call me anytime. I'm not an expert in anything, but probably make it sound good.
I know, right? I'm like, at least got to make it sound believable.
That's right.
So this is your 7th book. Now, when did you release this one?
Blood Red Ivory came out January 18th.
Okay.
And the audiobook, the Wild Blue, is doing an audiobook. I can't wait. It's going to be my first one. So I'm really, really excited about that. So that comes out May 2nd.
May? Oh, I got to wait till May? I love audiobooks, especially when it's this genre. This genre on audiobooks kills. Like, no pun intended.
Yeah, there's plenty of that. But you know, it's weird. I can't do fiction in the audio format, but every nonfiction I read, if it's biography, if it's true crime, whatever it is, I feel like I'm at a TED Talk. So I always go audiobook on my nonfiction. But for fiction, I gotta read it. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
I listen to both. Like, I listened to Tip of the Spear by Ryan Hendrickson. It's his true life story. Soldier in Afghanistan. He actually lost half of his leg, but then went back into combat afterwards, and all this. I mean, I literally was just chills running through me the entire time. And then I listened to, it was a rom-com, and it was about all of these first dates that she went. It was absolutely hilarious. I was riding in my car for like 15 hours laughing the entire time. So I think I think it's the story. For me, it has to be the story. It has to be intriguing. And this sounds intriguing. Like, this right here sounds absolutely intriguing. Like, I want to hear about animals messing up the crime scene and stuff. And you talk about the witty one-zingers and stuff like that, one-line zingers and stuff. I want to hear Tybinhoff, you know, say those things, you know. So yeah.
I try to keep it light. I mean, I just like we talked about, it's once you kind of in the world long enough, and I've been in law enforcement for 22 years in some form or fashion, and it gets really hard to take a whole lot of stuff serious. So I don't want the books to be like super dark and super like you know. I want it to be fun a little bit. I want there to be, you know, there's the dark stuff that's got to get done, but I want the guy to approach it with a perspective that it's like, it's hard things, but there's always something funny about you can always find something funny, even in the darkest places,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, obviously there's a lot of authors out there that learn from podcasts and learn from authors like yourself and myself that have been there before and have done the dang on thing, that have ripped the band-aid off and went. So I always ask the question because it's important so they can learn as well. What if you had any advice to give to another author, whether it's their first time, their 10th, their 20th time writing a book, what would be your best piece of advice?
I think, and after having that conversation with a few people, it's just find a routine and stick to it. It's writing is, everybody wants to look at us as artists, as we're these creative, artistic people, and we are, but it's still a job. You got to look at it like a job. You go to work at this time and you get off work at this time, and you don't quit. You just can't quit, because there's nobody that's gonna push you, and say, hey, did you get your 500 words in today? Or, hey, how'd your writing go today? Or, where's my next book? Nobody's going to do that for you. So if you're not doing it, there's nobody, if a book doesn't get written, there's billions of books out there that have never been finished. So for everybody that I talk to, I always say, pick a time, pick a place, and go there, rinse and repeat every day. Because otherwise life will happen and you'll get distracted. So yeah, find that routine and just stick to it. Look at it like a blue collar job, because writing is, nobody's gonna be there to help. It's very solo existence when you look at it.
Absolutely. And I was having a conversation with my friend Elizabeth Johnson. She's the marketing director at Playtime Multimedia and Publishing. And she had someone tell her that, she's been they wrote their first book, and over the past year, they've only sold like a couple of copies. And since they're not selling well, they're done. They quit. And I was like, what do you mean quit? Like, if you're an author and this is what you want to do with your life, whether you're selling books or not, you just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you just keep writing.
Yeah. At this
like,
point,
there's no quit.
Yeah. At this point for me, it'd be, writing's the same way as, like, if I skipped a week at the gym, I start getting cranky, and my wife will be like, go to the gym. And I'm the same way. If I don't get to write, if I miss a couple days writing, I'll start getting cranky the same way. It's just habit at this point.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for people who get into the writing game and look at it as a moneymaker, because you just can't. You'll be destroyed. You will be destroyed.
Hallelujah.
If you look at this as a get rich quick scheme, it's just not.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm very open and honest about my sales and what I've done. I tell everyone my first 4 years of writing, I made less than $400 because I'm self-published. I didn't get a publishing deal. I do everything on my own, and I have focused more on promoting other people than myself. And my first 4 years, I made less than $400. Last year, I made $347 in 1 year. So this was never about getting rich. For me, it was always about writing. It was about writing the books. It's about doing what I love more than anything. And as I grow, will my income grow? More than likely, absolutely.
Yep.
I'm learning how to market. I'm learning how to grow more. I'm learning how to write better. So everything is getting better. In the beginning, I did my own book covers. Now I have a cover designer. In the beginning, I didn't have an editor that knew what they were doing. Now I have a good editor. In the beginning, I wasn't a great writer. I'm a better writer now. Eventually, I'm going to be a great writer. I mean, you just have to continue. So when you said that routine, I was like, thank you, Jesus, people. There's no quit. Yeah. When it's something that you have a passion to do.
Yep. And if it's not a passion, it's never gonna work out for you. It's just it just is. You do it because you want to do it, and you hope to entertain people,
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people reach you at? I'm gonna put it here in the comments for YouTube and for our Facebook viewers, but I want to make sure that when this goes over to the podcast format, those folks that can't see it can hear it.
It's pretty much everywhere. The Amazon, of course, is the biggest one for everybody, but Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, they're all listed there. But I mean, mostly everybody I talk to is e-readers now. I love going to the book conferences and where people pick up stuff, but easiest and fastest is always going to be Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but they're available pretty much anywhere. Yeah, my site, johnstampriter.com. And that will lead also to my Substack. I have a blog there, the They Did What, crime blog.
Cool.
Which kind of, like we were talking about earlier, I kind of take dumb criminal stories, and if something inspires me, I kind of write my own version of them. Just kind of getting reps writing small short fiction.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's just my Amazon page, my Instagram, John Stamp Writer. They're all consistent. So I'm easy to find.
Yeah. That's not so bad for a law enforcement guy, right?
I mean, everybody always asks, why don't you write under a pen name? And I'm like, I would have no idea how to market a pen name. And if you look at all my stuff outside my short bio, there's nothing that links back to what I do now. I don't bring the current job into it. I just, there's the past there, and I'm a writer. If you look at me online, you've got me as an author. You don't have me as anything else, Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand. I mean, you don't have to have your real life and your writer life, even if you use the same name, synonymous with each other.
Yeah.
I have different pen names because of the different genres, so people don't get super confused.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just because I have children's books and things like that. And Auntie Nan sounds a little bit better than CJ Ives Lopez. You know what I mean? John, I've had a great time. I mean, I could just sit here and talk forever because I have so many questions about my serial killer novel, but this is all about you. Mm-hmm. So, but I want to ask you this question. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure we touch on before we head off for the day? Because I really want to hear Blood Red Ivory on audiobook. I hate that I have to wait till May, so I might end up having to just go and pick up a copy and read it myself.
Well, I didn't know. I think we covered everything. I just appreciate you taking time out of your Saturday for me, and it's fun. I love doing these things. I love just talking, especially when you can sit down and talk books with somebody. It's just it's fun. And when when somebody who's not a writer hears that you have fun talking books, it doesn't.
They don't get it.
I love conversations like this, so thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your works of art with the Author's Porch and all of our audience. I owe you an email, which I'll be doing that as soon as here. And have a great Saturday. Guys, thanks for coming and watching with us today. This is our next to last episode before we take a little bit of a pause on the podcast, but that doesn't mean the Author's Porch is going away. It just means we're going to take a little break for a while. So make sure you come back and watch us whenever we're on. And don't forget to go and visit our friends Brendan and Vamsi over at mastertalk.ca, where they teach you the power of effective communication. And if you want the best cup of coffee on this side of heaven, make sure that you go and check out Third Day Coffee Seguin. That's thirddayscoffeeseguin.com. And we're going to catch you guys next time. I'm CJ. That's John Stamp. Go read his books and write on, everybody. Bye, John.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
The Author's Porch is a certified veteran-hosted podcast. Show your support. Tune in, share, and subscribe.